Okay, so before we get to the black cube, I just wanted to mention something that's related to this video. And when I say related, I mean that in a very exaggerated sense, but I still think it's worth talking about. So not too long ago, my parents and I had this conversation about the part in Exodus where it describes how God provided the Israelites a new food source of manna and quail. And then over time, it describes how they became very unappreciative of what they had and complained about eating the same thing every day. I think in light of that, if you want to make some argument against eating quail every day, then that's one thing. But then it describes how they were given manna to eat, and you think about what manna is. It's described as being white as coriander seed, and it's like a wafer that's as sweet as honey. And it's also described as food that's eaten by angels. Angels don't need to eat food or drink water or need any kind of physical sustenance to stay alive because they're spirits. So they don't need to eat this stuff, but they can if they want to. So for 40 years, they're eating something that's like the equivalent of a supernatural snack from another realm. I wouldn't really think that would be something to be tired of. I would think that would be one of the best things you could ever have, but you think about their other options. They did have livestock, but there's a few guesses to why they didn't eat their livestock. And then outside of that, what other options did they really have? They couldn't eat reptiles because that's unclean, that's against the law. They couldn't eat bugs because that's against the law, and I could really care less what some elitist idiot has to say about that. I'm pretty sure most bugs are carcinogenic anyways. They wouldn't eat sand, they wouldn't eat dirt. So they really didn't have any other options. And it's easy for someone like me to say all that, given that I didn't live in that time period. I wasn't in that situation. I wasn't in the desert waiting 40 years to go to a land that was promised to me that I've never seen before. But you just sort of think that in light of their circumstances, they'd be a bit more appreciative of what they had, but I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. I guess they could eat sand if they wanted to. They could eat dirt. They would have a hefty percentage of what would be their mineral intake, I suppose. So, that's a plus, I guess. Of all the mysterious and confounding topics that have established a sense of renown from mass media sites and social forums, the black cube is an icon that has secured its place in popular discussion over the years. It's most notably mentioned as either having a metaphysical connection to the planet Saturn, or as a general reference to the Kaaba stone in Mecca, or as the designated name for one of the Mossad's secret espionage organizations. And we shouldn't exclude its association with its well-known variant, that being the Black Monolith, which has garnered much attention as well, given its popularity from films such as 2001: A Space Odyssey. Because in 2020, it's obvious how the film was a source of inspiration for a series of mysterious structures reported to be in various places throughout the world that claim to be evidence of an extraterrestrial message. But before we can examine the black cube for what it means, it's best we study the history of the cube itself. Before its geometric definition was penned by Euclid, Plato believed it represented the Earth and associated it with its material formation among other solids or polyhedra that created the universe. Something Pythagoras thought as well. It was a concept that Plato also recorded to be postulated by the Greek mathematician Theaetetus, among other aspects of his life, by which he also casts him as a figure of dialogue on epistemology. There was even a scientific study published in July of 2020 that concluded that the Earth is constructed of cubic formations as Plato described. A joint study by the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Debrecen, and the Budapest University of Technology and Economics found that the average shapes of geological materials do in fact occur as something like a cube. By measuring and studying the various geological samples and their rates of fragmentation, the team discovered that the natural fragmentation of minerals always retained a geometric similarity to a cube or hexagon. The research team describes their findings by saying, "We apply the theory of convex mosaics to show that the average geometry of natural two-dimensional fragments, from mud cracks to the Earth's tectonic plates, have two attractors, Platonic quadrangles and Voronoi hexagons," in which they also state that, remarkably, the average shape of natural rock fragments is cuboid. When viewed through the lens of convex mosaics, natural rock fragments are indeed geometric shadows of Plato's forms. One scientist further confirms this result by considering that one thing we've speculated in our group is that quite possibly Plato looked at a rock outcrop, and after processing or analyzing the image subconsciously in his mind, he conjectured that the average shape is something like a cube. And as amazing as it is to consider the accuracy behind Plato's notion about the Earth, There isn't any evidence to attest that the concepts of other polyhedral shapes physically correspond to any of the basic elemental forms of fire, water, and air. So since that time, the cube has found a place in the curiosity of the mind, as mathematics and philosophy have studied its form and existence as if it's speaking to a greater reality about the universe and the human understanding of it. And that has really been expressed in the realm of entertainment and other examples of pop culture. But the most attention it's received has really been in the last several years with this online narrative of the black cube. Given the frequency of the black cube in public representations of art and technology, most mainly see it as a symbol of chaos with ties to the planet Saturn or the worship of Saturn. And there's another consideration to this unique observation that convinces many of this idea. Back in 2016, NASA released new space probe images of a strange anomaly located at Saturn's northern pole. Though this phenomenon was discovered back in the 1980s, these were the most recent and detailed images NASA has obtained since the Cassini space probe's orbit around the planet ended in 2004. It's supposed to be a hexagon-shaped vortex made up of strong winds reaching somewhere up to 200 miles per hour and spanning as far as 2,000 miles across the northern surface. NASA officials commented on it by saying, each latitudinal band represents airflow at different speeds and clouds at different heights compared to the neighboring bands. One scientist from the University of Leicester was stated saying, while we did expect to see a vortex of some kind on Saturn's northern pole as it grew warmer, its shape is really surprising. Either a hexagon has spawned spontaneously and identically at two different altitudes, one lower in the clouds and one high in the stratosphere, or the hexagon is in fact a towering structure spanning a vertical range of several hundred kilometers. Now, it would be too much to assume that this is some kind of alien structure on the surface of Saturn, but it's really odd how the planet's magnetic and gravitational forces redirect the storm vortex in a way to take this shape. And the fact that the Cassini space probe's voyage around Saturn ended in 2017, there are still a lot of questions about this anomaly that remain unanswered. So based on the shape of the vortex, many see this as a metaphysical connection to the black cube, since the geometric outline of a cube, along with that of a hexagram, can be imposed over it. And since these indications are taken from different tenets of mysticism, it's no wonder people would make those connections. The collection of these ideas have built upon the notion that the public displays of the black cube are seen as a sign of Saturn worship, which is the ultimate force behind the formation of a new world order. And as far-fetched as that sounds, that's just it. There are aspects to that are true to an extent. When we look at an organization like the United Nations, for example, their efforts of humanitarian aid and foreign intervention have not only been rooted in promoting a narrative of interfaith tolerance on an international scale, but also a system of mystical philosophy. And this philosophy acts as the real catalyst for their motives to consolidate peace and spiritual unity for their agenda of a new global coalition of nations. The Lucis Trust is a non-profit organization that concentrates on promoting New Age spirituality through media and social programs as an incentive for humanitarian action. Founded in 1922 under its original title as the Lucifer Publishing Company by spiritualist Alice and Foster Bailey, it would later become an official affiliate organization to the United Nations in support of their policies and activities. This interrelation is also evident in one section of the UN headquarters known as the Meditation Room, which was established as a place of prayer and self-reflection for visitors and guests of varying religious beliefs. One focal point in the room is a mural of light and dark colored geometric shapes that are meant to be symbolic of the sky dispensing light on the earth and the various religious beliefs uniting to form a single image. The other focal point is a dark colored stone slab made of iron ore representing the earth and its spiritual steadfastness, and as an altar to what they claim is the God whom man worships under many names and in many forms. Now, it's not a black cube or monolith, but it's difficult not to suspect that it would have a similar meaning. But besides that, you also have false information surrounding the Old Testament's depiction of the God of Israel by claiming he's just a variation of Kronos or Saturn. One example is based on what is to most a very contested view associated with Yahweh, the God of Israel, and the god El, who is the chief god of the Canaanite pantheon and a deity also associated with the planet Saturn. The presumption by most, given the similarities in morphology and phonetics of the dialects regional to the Levant, most scholars have assumed that the Israelite religion, centered on the worship of one God, was a later development from the polytheistic religions of Canaan and surrounding nations. One notion is due to the proliferation of the Hebrew word Elohim and corresponding words with similar phonetics and meaning found in other Levantine languages, such as the cuneiform language known as Ugaritic. The presumption by most who ascribe to the polytheistic view also claim that this development is evident due to the similarities in the theocratic structure of a higher-ranking god above an assembly or council of other lesser divine beings. Such is the case in certain passages in the Old Testament and Canaanite texts such as the Baal cycle. Though the late Dr. Michael S. Heiser, as a revered authority on this subject, would say otherwise, since he had spent much of his prolific career correcting what is a misapplication by scholars. In a scholarly article concerning the subject matter, Dr. Heiser discusses how Israelite writers not only denoted Yahweh's uniqueness amongst other divine beings, but how his role in the Israelite concept of the divine hierarchy differs from that of others. One reason being the misapplied use of the word Elohim, since it is the general word for any spiritual being, rather than a designated term for a specific set of worshiped beings. Another example theorizes a possible connection with the Star of David and various meanings for the hexagram as a sign of a pagan deity known as a Remphan or Kiyun. Now, as far as we know, it's well known as the Seal of Solomon when used as a symbol in Jewish magic, and does seem to predate how most know it as the Star of David, though a video by the Expedition Bible YouTube channel claims it was first known as the Shield of David and even suggests it as a sign of messianic prophecy, given the examples of star symbols on Israelite artifacts in early churches and synagogues. Considering those possibilities while regarding its most prominent meaning, it was later adapted as the designated symbol to represent the Jewish people in the 17th century, though there have been various ways in distinguishing between the two over time. And concerning the connection to a pagan god, possibly a Mesopotamian or Egyptian god, referred to as Kiyun, the star god in the Old Testament, or later as Remphan in the New Testament, scholarly sources do make an association with Saturn, but others cannot definitively confirm that the symbol itself originated with the worship of this deity. And with all that, there are other specious details that added to this outlook on the planet Saturn. One is a very subjective take on the ceremonial headwear worn by Orthodox Jews, referred to as phylacteries or tefillin, in which quotations from the book of Deuteronomy were written down on small pieces of parchment and placed inside these small black boxes as a way to meditate on commandments during prayer. And while the word phylactery ascribed to that artifact does derive from the Greek word phylacterion, which means amulet or safeguard, being suggestive of a mystical intent, there isn't any evidence to support that the use of these items are directly linked to Saturn worship. The practice itself seems to be a ceremonial embellishment for worship inspired by the commandments in the book of Deuteronomy that goes as far back as being practiced by the residents of Qumran, even before they resembled the black box imagery we see today. Another theory that's out there, which happens to be completely absurd, is that the word Israel is actually made up of a composite of names from the foreign deities of Isis, Ra, and El, as if in its simplified form is meant to be read as Israel. The word actually derives from a passage in Genesis 32, when Jacob, one of the patriarchs of the nation of Israel, described how he physically wrestled with God, and from that altercation, God chose to rename him Israel, a name that in Hebrew means wrestles with God. So since we've looked at different ideas and theories surrounding the black cube and what its meaning might be, we now have to ask ourselves, what does it really stand for? Based on everything we covered so far, the one concept we really should focus on is its presentation as a metaphysical, or more so rather a spiritual symbol. Many see it as a symbol of chaos and Saturn. But why is that, and what does that really mean? In order to find out why that is, we have to take a look at various avenues of mysticism and occultism that form this idea.